We're back with you tonight, You're in Focus, and thanks for staying on. U.S. consulting firm Bain Co. has expressed deep regret for its role in what Treasury has called corrupt and fraudulent practices related to a Sars contract between 2015 and 2017. This comes after Treasury recently announced that it was prohibiting Bain from tendering for public sector work for a period of 10 years. The ban comes after the UK government decided to cut ties with the company for its role in state capture in South Africa. The company is challenging that in court. Joining us now for his thoughts on Bain Co's reaction to the ban is Shadow World Director for Investigations, Paul Holden. Paul, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us this evening here on in Focus. Is the ban on Bain Co justifiable? Is it the right kind of punishment? And maybe was it overdue?
I think it's very much justified, and I think it's exactly the sort of punishment we want to see. You know, I've been working in anti-corruption stuff for over a decade now, and all of the studies show that if you want to tackle corruption, one of the primary ways you do that is you make sure that businesses aren't just held to account. You know, you don't just have a couple of court cases or prosecutions, but if companies are threatened with the risk of debarment, of not being able to make money in the future, that really changes things, and it changes the corporate culture very quickly. So I think it's an incredibly positive step forward, and I think it's utterly justified if you consider the extent of Bain's wrongdoing in South Africa. I mean, I think what you have to bear in mind is the Zondo Commission's findings around Bain were really utterly damning. You know, it wasn't just that they got a corrupt contract; it was that they were involved in the systematic destruction of a key part of the South African state. And I think, you know, a 10 years debarment is more than fair as a result.
Yeah, they would want us to believe that they literally were just coaching the company and they were paid for coaching the company. And besides, if the tender was corrupt, they've now paid back the money. Was it as simple as that? Were they just coaching them on strategy, on an organogram, and possibly their new direction?
No, I think the Zondo Commission is incredibly clear on that there was a plan before, there was hatched quite a long time in advance to appoint Tomoyani to the position of Commissioner of Sars. And then as soon as he arrived in that position, to use that role to totally restructure Sars. There was, there's a premeditated plan for that to happen. And I think about, one of the most chilling aspects of the Zondo Commission report was that they developed a 100-day plan in which Tomoyani was going to go in there and neutralize his opponents and neutralize the people that ran SARS. And the thing to bear in mind is the people who are running SARS at that time were running it very well. It was one of the best revenue collection services in the country and was starting to win the fight against the illicit economy. And for Bain to go in there as a premeditated plan to go and remove these people who've done incredible jobs for South Africa, and then replace it with a system that's totally dysfunctional. It's way beyond executive coaching. It's way beyond CEO coaching. This was really quite distressing stuff.
They believe they should have been given at least an opportunity to respond to the impending restriction prior to its apparent implementation. Do they have a right to that?
I mean, I'm not sure if they have a right under law. I mean, I'd imagine they'll probably try and bring, I can imagine a high court application to try and establish that right under law. But I think it's a perfectly appropriate thing for a country to decide that there's too great a risk to deal with a contractor. Debarment is one of the tools that are recommended by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which runs a particular anti-corruption initiative. And they really strongly recommend the use of debarment as a tool for fighting corporate corruption. So, they may have a chance if they go to the High Court, but I also think that generally speaking, under local and international law, it's considered, within the prerogative of the state to decide who they do and they don't contract with. I mean, they're not saying that Bain can't do business in South Africa. They're not saying Bain can't, work with private sector clients. They're just saying that state money won't be going towards Bain, which I think is the right call.
Now, of course, there is this rebuttal that says, yeah, plus the head of the local office who was responsible is no longer here, he has not returned, and we have, despite reached out to Treasury, we've been involved in dialogue and so on and so forth. Private sector companies that believe that that is enough for them to then continue doing business. I suppose this represents a new standard that we need to set as far as not only the companies but also those individuals who they might say, well, he has left and is no longer in the country.
I mean, I think the problem that you have around anti-corruption enforcement in general is the number of times a company might be caught being corrupt or otherwise being involved in wrongdoing. And the company will say, well, sorry, it was actually just a couple of rogue employees, and we've turned over a new leaf, and we've appointed a new board, and so on and so on. And, that's an argument you can make ad infinitum, right? You can say that whenever you're caught doing something wrong, you'd say, oh, there's just a rogue employee, it's just a rogue board member. And there has to be a line drawn at a certain point where we don't, I think South Africans in particular have to say, well, you can't just get away with saying it's a bad apple. You can't just get away with saying, well, we're just going to do things differently now. There's appropriate levels of punishment for allowing that to happen over an incredibly long period of time. And, the reality is that when Bain does start contracting to the state again in 10 years' time, one thing I can absolutely guarantee you is they'll do it by the letter of the law. Now, if it was in 10 years' time and this hadn't happened, had they been allowed to get away with the argument of, what, it was just one or two people and we've turned over a new leaf, it happened again, I don't think that's an appropriate mechanism of preventing this sort of behavior again. So I think this is an incredibly good decision.
Appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Paul, for coming on. That is Shadow World Director of Investigations there, Paul Holden, responding, of course, to actions now being taken by Bain, taking this matter to court, saying that Treasury should have given them an opportunity to respond to the restriction before it's being implemented. And, of course, they're challenging even the fact that they were not involved in any procurement irregularities. In fact, they say they're working in collaboration with Sars. These are some of the matters that will be ventilated, I'm sure, in the court of law.